Okay, we are live and it is about time today. We are on a little bit late. And so, welcome everyone to Mission Top. Mission Top is a place, it's a farmstead and ranch. It is a family, my family. My name is Gary Nuila, and it is the place where my family lives and the way of life that we are trying to develop. This week we've been talking how it's also a kingdom in identity, and underlying everything, it's also a process. And does love have to do with Mission Top? Well, today we will explore that. But first of all, yes, my apologize for being here a bit late. So those of you that have been following these regular streams, this week I have been playing Bachelor for the week, as the other 9 members of my family have been off to visit family, and I was left to tend the farmstead by itself, which has been an interesting experience. I talked about that the other day. But one thing that I've learned is that a solo person can run all the activities we have on the farmstead: the sheep and the goats, the pigs, the chickens, the dogs, the cats, the brooding chicks, and other projects that we're trying to develop. Although it does take quite a bit of work and calculation, and if things just don't line up exactly, then problems can happen. Such as this morning when I went out to take care of the animals, and there was quite a bit of wind last night, and a section of the pig fencing had gone down, and luckily the pigs stuck around where they knew the food would be, so they were just kind of there having a good time outside of their pen. But it took a little bit of time to take care of them, and then there was some extra time making an extra big paddock today for the sheep, because once again, if you've been watching any of the videos of kind of how Mission Top's been built over time, we are adding some new additions to Mission Top today. And those are going to be 2 livestock guardian dogs that I get to go pick up immediately after this stream. And for that reason, it won't be too long. These are 2, I think they're kind of Akbash, Anatolian Shepherd mixed dogs that will live out there permanently with the sheep and the goats. And I'm super excited to have these. These are puppies. They're by a reputable breeder that brings them up, bonding them to sheep. And so they should come here and have a good head start. But it's going to be a lot of work because with working dogs, I mean, they have to be kind of trained on how to do their job. And so that will be taking up some time here. But I look forward to it, because every time we bring something like a new animal, a new creature, it becomes part of this broader living entity, this broader kingdom that we've been talking about, which is Mission Top. And so I will give you updates as things develop with those dogs, as names, and all those things that evolve with that. So, all right, let's get into this stream today. The fundamental problem, right, with love, as I defined it. So let's get into that, right? Love is a many-splendored thing, right? Love lifts us up where we belong. All you need is love. All you need is love. All you need is love. Love. Love is all you need, right? Love is the answer. Just love. Love is what matters. Love conquers all. That's the power of love, right? And that, in my little silly attempt there to give an appropriate intro, is what I see as the problem underlying love, right? That kind of illustrates everything that I want to talk about today. Because what did I just say? Did I say anything with that? We've been conditioned to accept love as an unassailable universal good. And whatever is aligned with love must be good, right? Because how could love ever be bad? So love is popularly conceived as not the answer to the world's problems or your problems. Its invocation and our failure to see for what it is often makes things worse and leads to mystical thinking. That's kind of what the thing that I want to get today is that as it's seen, it actually isn't the answer as we conceive it today. And that is because of its vagueness, its nebulous nature. And so to even suggest such a thing is to tread on treacherous ground, because, who would criticize love? And I know, I risk being kind of labeled like Dan in real life, if you've seen that movie where his daughter labels him off as a murderer of love, right? So hopefully we don't get that far, because as it turns out, I actually do like love, properly conceived, or how about just defined, as we'll get to. So don't think that I'm going overboard with this, but I do, I am trying to make a point about the way that we use it predominantly and just kind of flippantly in culture. So more often than not, an association with love is really, I think, just a cop-out, a cue for an audience, usually to turn off their brains and accept whatever is then associated with love. That's the power of love, and people know it. We've been taught to think that whatever is associated with love must be good and cannot possibly be bad, right? Like, again, who would dare kind of fight something that's attached to love? And so the power in that is that it can become a powerful tool to use to do everything from, resolving a movie's conflict without any further thinking needed, or to achieve your preferred political ends. And so there's an easy way to tell if love is being used as a cue to shut off your brain, or as something, or on the other hand, as something useful, right? And all you need to do is pay attention to if it's ever explained, right, or defined or clarified what is actually meant by this love and this invocation of the love. In other words, pay attention to whether the person or group or movement associating themselves with love ever takes the time to answer the simple question, what is love? And again, I actually do believe in love. I do believe it is a powerful concept. My problem with it is as popularly conceived. Because if popularly conceived, it's never a notion that is actually has to answer to such a question as, what is it, right? It's an undefined ethereal force of universal good, and that's kind of how it's used. You need to only ask yourself, when was the last time you heard somebody use the word love or invoke the word love in order to prove that point? Because most likely it was just kind of used in a way that assumed so much that you would accept it and you knew exactly what was being talked about. So another way of looking at it is that love is the thing that everyone knows intimately until you ask them to tell you about it. Because, again, we never demand this kind of precision. We know that it's good, but that's about all anyone is ever willing to actually kind of get specific about it. It's a fog, and that can be a bad thing when people try to hide behind a fog. And so I want you even, here in the chat, something, try to define it yourself. Give me your definition of love. I'd be interested in it. Most likely you'll find that finding a satisfying definition, we can kind of, go around the edges. Well, it's got to have some of this and it's got to have some of that, but kind of finding a satisfying definition that really encapsulates it, I guess you could say, is kind of like trying to define the taste of salt, right? We all think we know what it is, we comprehend it, but putting that comprehension into words can prove a little maddening. And so we leave it undefined. Instead, we're just asked to feel it, right? We're told that its power is unbounded and we're to accept it as good without challenge, without argument. And again, whoever's on the side of love must be good. Whoever's against it must be evil. And so where that leaves me at the moment, I don't know. You'll decide. And again, so what can you do if at the end of the day people realize that that's kind of the nature of love? How do people use it? Let's get a little more specific. For one, it can be used to conveniently resolve movie plots or get heroes out of sticky situations, right? What solved everything in Frozen at the end of the day? It was the power of love. There was this big problem and just, through the power of love, everything is healed, all problems solved. How? Don't ask how, right? It's solved. What protected Harry from Voldemort in the Sorcerer's Stone in the first Harry Potter movie? Well, Harry, it was your love, right? What brought Neo back to life in The Matrix? I love The Matrix, but this is kind of one of the weak points of the movie. Not that I didn't like, the possible relationship between Trinity and Neo, but the fact that, love's kiss brings you back from the dead. Again, how? Don't worry about how. It's love. Of course it works, right? So how many times has somebody been brought back to life Far and Away is another movie I like. Again, ends on such a kiss that brings someone back to life. And how many times has that power of love been used to conquer the great evil that has been put in such a movie? And again, how exactly? Don't ask how, right? Don't think, just accept, just feel, right? For the same reasons, love can be cunningly used as a political tool, though, and that's where it gets, again, kind of has a cunning use to it. I'm not saying consciously the way people used to, but everybody knows underlying if they can get love, behind your side, then that's power, because again, that's the power you're asking. Essentially, this is your argument: is your cause, place your cause in this blank space, just love. All right, so you've got your cause, you put it next to love, and now to oppose you is to oppose love, right? Which conveniently means you can label anybody that does oppose you as bigoted or evil, right? Because my side is love, your side is not, right? And so finally, when all else fails, love can be invoked as the solution to all problems, right? It's the solution to world peace. And again, we can just, we know that it's complicated. We know that these solutions are so elusive. But when somebody stands up and gives a speech and just says, if we only would love each other, all this would be solved. And yes, that is the answer, isn't it? Man, I can't believe we missed it this whole time. It can bring the country together. It can save your family. Love, just love. So the next time you hear the word love invoked, ask yourself if what the speaker is really wanting to achieve is to give you a cue, right, to stop thinking and accept whatever follows from their mouth next. And more often than not, again, lots of people are willing to do just that. So I, for one, want to put a stop to this kind of laziness. You can tell I feel strongly about this, and it's because I do think it's a laziness, right? And there's a cunning to it. Again, it's not people intentionally doing this most of the time. It's just kind of what we know works, and we do things that work, right? So, and there's a simple way to get around this, and that's simply to demand a definition. So the next time you find somebody invoking the concept of love to try to cheaply gain acceptance of what they're advocating, just ask them, well, what exactly do you mean by love? And, most likely you might get a reply, well, to love. To which you can reply, no, I don't know, right? I need you to explain it to me, what you mean by it. And if you force the issue, you may eventually get some attempts at a different definition, like, to love is to care for others. God is love. We really like that phrase. That sounds nice, right? Love is it's an emotion, or similar things that just go to the point that love, as it's commonly used, is just an undefined emotion of good felt for others that's supposed to have kind of, again, magical. There's a mystical association. That's a good way of putting it, is there's kind of a magic and mysticism to love that we invoke through it. But even with these definitions, you'll find that further questions such as, why should I love that thing? How should I love? And under what conditions should I love will not produce satisfactory answers under those definitions, because really no one really wanted to think about the matter in the first place. Again, thinking's hard. It takes effort. And anytime you start thinking and trying to say what you mean, other people, you risk other people misunderstanding, right? It immediately turns to them having an invitation to think and to counter what you're kind of thinking. So thinking and talking can inevitably lead to more of debate, and that's uncomfortable for people, right? It's not easy. We'd prefer something that we can just kind of sidestep issues and get to something that pulls us back together. And of course, invoking love in something, again, you can kind of end debates with that. And so, I'm not blaming people for doing this. It's just, again, trying to kind of say, let's when appropriate, because it's not always appropriate to just kind of force this kind of thing, but when appropriate, let's try to kind of put a stop again to the laziness. So now that I've made such a fuss about it, it would be, a little bit remiss and cowardly if I didn't provide a definition of love myself, after all that I've said about it. So here's mine. And in putting it out there, I'm not saying this is the final definition, but at least I'm trying to give you a definition. And you'll find I have reasons for this definition, and it works in a lot of situations. So, this is kind of how things work when you actually start thinking. This is how science works. This is how most processes of kind of trying to develop things work, is you put out the definition and you see if it works. Again, go into that American pragmatism. You find that so often I go back to that as my theory of truth. Does it work? And if it does work, great. But then if you find places where it doesn't work, then you say, oh, well, maybe there's a definition that would work even better, and help me find it, help me develop it, right? So here is my definition so far. And that is that love is the emotion of affection. It's the power, the force, and attraction we feel toward that which we value. And that's it. And you're probably wondering, that's it? All this just for that simple definition. And yes, that's it, right? But give it a chance, because I think that you'll find that there is utility in this definition. It works in a lot of contexts. That comes from making the connection between, it primarily comes from the connection between love and value, okay? When you bring value into the equation, again, it cuts through, it clarifies, right? And it brings some relevant questions into the fray. So to begin with, this definition works in all the myriad ways we use love, all right? At least that I've been able to figure out thus far. So notice that in our speech, we use love in all sorts of ways. Like we even use it when we say, I love pizza, just as we use it when we say, I've found the love of my life. And, innately we feel that one's kind of a light and inconsequential love, and the other one's more profound. If you found somebody that you profoundly love and you want to share a life with, or you say that, we should love as God loves, that there's another thing to throw in. Does my definition work in all those kind of different contexts? So a religious context, a romantic context, a profound, emotional and romantic context, or just when you love the pizza, right? A good definition would work for all of them. And I think this one does, because when we say we love pizza, what we're saying is we find great value in pizza, right? Again, that tie between love and value, namely the combination of its gooey cheese, crispy pepperoni, and crust that's slightly crispy on the outside and chewy on the inside, ignites the pleasure centers of our brain. There's a beauty in pizza. There's an experience of pizza that is of great value, right? So take like the mountains. I love the mountains. But why do I love them? I love them because of what I value in them. They're symbols of awesome and reverential power. They are a reflection of my values. For me, the mountains signify challenge. They inspire, again, reverence and awe for things greater than me, and help me to place myself in nature and the universe. The mountains have clean air. They resonate, in other words, they resonate with values that I have. I see those values in the mountain. I have those values. Therefore, there's a attraction, a power and affection in that resonance of values, okay? Again, I could go on. They keep my body healthy. They offer a stillness that allows my mind to rest and rejuvenate. They're beautiful, they're majestic, they're grand. These are all things I value. And then I see them in the mountain or experience them in the mountain. Hence, I love mountains, right? So when you define love like this, love isn't something divorced from thinking or reason either, right? Again, so many, in all these other kind of notions of love, that, the power of love and love is all you need and things like that, you're kind of inviting people to stop thinking, stop reasoning, and just accept, right? Just feel. Well, with this kind of definition of love, there's an invitation to go further into it, right? Love requires kind of your whole being. You do experience it, but it's also a resonance of emotion with thinking. It's an invitation to think and ponder. Why, if I'm feeling this love, because love is a felt thing, why do I feel it? if love is tied up with value, what value am I seeing in this thing that I love, that I'm feeling this love towards, right? And so, again, I like this definition because it invites that whole experience and gives you something to go further into with it. And then you can be liberated from that feeling. Another reason I like this is that you can be liberated from that feeling that we're supposed to just love everything, unequivocally, accept whatever anybody invokes in the name of love. You're just supposed to just love it. Because with this kind of definition, you can say, okay, I'm cool, I like love, but you're telling me to love this. Well, I tie love to value. Tell me, what is it that I'm supposed to be valuing here? And let's get specific, because maybe there's something in what you've got that you're attaching to love that is full of value, right? But maybe not everything that you're attaching to value. So I can say, I love that, but I don't love this, because I see value in this part of it, but I don't see value in that part of it, okay? So again, there's my basic definition, and I'll kind of leave it out there for you to chew on. I'm going to get into a few more quotes and tell you where the basic kind of inspiration I got for this definition of love. And then we'll finish by going a little bit into kind of different types of love, because that's also a very useful way of going deeper with love. But I also want to I see a few things have come in on the chat, so let's take a little breather here and give me a chance to see what has come in on the chat on it. So LSJT, glad you were here. I remember you asked me this kind of question. You see, I kind of gave this answer in a couple sentences, but this was a little bit the motivation to flesh this out a little bit more and give kind of more the background behind why I feel this way. So LSJT, love is willing the good of the other, but that is complicated. I think your problem is not with love, but with the people who lie about and simplify it to this mystical feeling. Love is a verb. Okay, yeah, so there is that thing about it, and that it is a felt thing, but it's also a thing that is done too. And there's the complexity in it, right? And maybe we can get that with the different types of love too. It also reminds me of Dan in Real Life, that same movie that has that murder of love quote, because just a few moments later, the boyfriend of the girl that's saying that says to the guy, love isn't an emotion, it's an ability. And the Dan in Real Life character is like, who told you that? That sounds, he's kind of, that sounds wise, but somebody had to have told you that. I didn't tell that. I just thought that up. And anyway, it's a funny moment. But the essence was that he's trying to say that same thing. Love is a verb. It's an ability. It's an action too. And so maybe, my definition doesn't quite capture that. So thanks for bringing that up, because I think that needs to be in it, in as much as there's, it's not just a felt thing. It's not just an attraction. There's something in it that, and this is where we get to kind of agape. There's a process. There's a relationship. There can be a development of it, you could say, right? There's a doing in it. So yes, good. That's exactly why we're doing this. All right, you also say, many people use the catchphrase of love to manipulate others, as you say, but that is not real love. Real love must be practical, logical, well-considered, not just let's sing and hug each other. And yes, well said. All right, so we have, this is Thomas and Jonah. We are on a manly half marathon run. Oh, so my son and his friend are there in Utah on a manly half marathon run. Well done, Thomas and Jonah. We salute you. It says, we are in the mountains right now. That's the nice thing about Utah, is that you can get oftentimes cell signal in the mountains, and there they are loving the mountains, enjoying them because they value them, right? All right, Christian says, I think misconceptions with love are part of the divorce epidemic, people expecting gooey feelings together. Yes, and we'll get to that. So thank you for bringing that up. But I wanted to put out there where I got this notion of love and this connection between love and value, because it's from an unexpected place. And I like to try to attribute kind of the origins of ideas that I have, because they just, because it shows the interconnected nature of ideas. Nobody has, purely original ideas. It just doesn't work that way. We are composed, in as much as this whole week we've been focusing on this concept of us as kingdoms. We're composed of other people, even in our information, that the patterns that make up our physical body and DNA and stuff, we're composed of other people. But we don't live in life. We brought this up before, kind of the example of the Romanian orphans that don't have people interacting with them, loving them as they grow up. They don't form into full persons. You are formed from other people, and so any ideas you have are a formation of other people's ideas that have come together, right? So I always like to attribute them where I know where they're from, so you can kind of see the origin of ideas, see how many people have influenced me, but also to kind of honor that fact that we're interconnected in so many ways. So this connection of love and value came from an unexpected source, because it was actually from Ayn Rand. All right, so Ayn Rand, again, is one of these fraught characters that either people seem to outright love her, there's the word love, or they outright detest her. And there tend to be a lot of people, the most vocal people about her are either those that are in essence trying to kind of pattern their whole lives around them and put her as an underlying force behind their whole way they approach life, or those who utterly want to counter her thought and whatnot. And my approach on Ayn Rand is that I think Ayn Rand is a great thinker that you should encounter in the process of developing your thinking. I think there's a lot of ideas in her thought that should be dealt with, right? That you should confront. And even her way of looking at things, it requires you to be like, yeah, I've got to deal with that. Especially the way that she conceives of self-interest and those kinds of things. But I wouldn't particularly encourage people to base their life on Ayn Rand, just because I think she didn't have like the best way of saying things. If you take her ideas and tweak them just a little bit, I think they turn into real wisdom. But as she presents them, I think they're lacking a little bit of nuance that kind of turns them to the ways in which they can be either ill-used or not, or they don't turn out well in actual life. So that's my little caveat on Ayn Rand. But I found that certain tidbits of her thought have been very valuable to me, and one of them is on love, which I wouldn't have suspected. So let me read you a few of her quotes on this, and you'll kind of see her thought. All right, this is the first one. Love is a response to values. It is with a person's sense of life that one falls in love, with that essential sum, that fundamental stand or way of facing existence, which is the essence of a personality. One falls in love with the embodiment of the values that formed a person's character, which are reflected in his widest goals or smallest gestures, which create the style of his soul, the individual style of a unique, unrepeatable, irreplaceable consciousness. It is one's own sense of life that acts as the selector and responds to what it recognizes as one's own basic values in the person of another. It is not a matter of professed convictions, though these are not irrelevant. It is a matter of much more profound, conscious and subconscious harmony. So on the surface, again, I find this kind of approach to love very powerful, because it does describe, things that I've experienced, right? Where, particularly, right, when developing or coming into realizing that I loved my wife, right? This was the kind of experience that there's something about, again, the values she embodies that resonate with my values, the sense of life that she has that resonates with the sense of life I have. There's that notion that opposites attract, right? And there's a certain sense that that's true. That's kind of my Rocky sense of filling gaps, right? There's a completeness that is often there, which means that you're attracted to that which will kind of enhance you or complete you, right? But it's not so much as just like opposites attract. I think that's a wrong way of seeing it. But there's also the flip side of that same things attract when it comes to love, and in particularly when it's values. There's a resonance there. And so, for example, in Ayn Rand's most popular book, Atlas Shrugged, you really see this because the main character, Dagny Taggart, she kind of basically has three loves throughout it. So this especially, it kind of really works in romantic type love, but it actually works in outside of romantic love. You see how with each character that she fell in love with and eventually had a sexual relationship with, because she has about three of them, I believe, in that book. With each of them, it was because of this core resonance of values, again, sense of life, and kind of deep sense of that this person aligned with who you were and what you most deeply treasure and value, right? And so when those two things come together, it's a triumph. There's a sense of triumph with it because it's like an enhancement of those things that you already found valuable. And in as much as romantic love, Eros type love, is the communion, the coming together, union of two different worlds, you could say, into one. Then there's just this enhancement of the fundamental values of those worlds, right? That usually in ways that even, kind of in a synergistic way, produce something better. And we'll get to that as far as when we look at Eros type love. But you can also see how this doesn't have to be just a romantic type of love. You can see that even in a friendship, which is philia love that we'll get into or something like that, there does have to be a certain resonance, a certain kind of shared worldview, if you will, with most people that you have this kind of love or affection towards. All right, let's read a couple more of her quotes. She says, I already read that one. Let's see. Love is the expressions of one's values, the greatest reward you can earn for the moral qualities you have achieved in your character and person. The emotional price. So it's like you can earn love, right? By having such good values that another person with those values, again, you earn their love. There is a sense in which I like that right there. It says, the emotional price paid by one man for the joy he receives from the virtues of another. Your morality demands that you divorce your love from values and hand it down to any vagrant. Again, there's that notion that we should love everyone, love everything. Well, no, you shouldn't. When you attach it to value, it's different, right? So she says, again, backing up, your morality demands, kind of the morality of culture, the world, that you divorce your love from values and hand it down to any vagrant, not as response to his worth, but as response to his need, not as reward, but as alms, not as payment for virtues, but as a blank check on vices. Your morality tells you that the purpose of love is to set you free from the bonds of morality, that love is superior to moral judgment, that true love transcends, forgives, and survives every manner of evil in its object, and the greater the love, the greater the depravity it permits to be loved. And she's maybe even approaching or criticizing a Christian sense here, in that like your morality tells you to love the most depraved thing. But I'll make the argument, I don't think that's what Christianity actually does, if it's specifically Christianity she's talking about. But there is this notion in the world, I mean, this is happening right now, today, where there's this call to love most that which is kind of most depraved, you could say, or most deprived, or the thing that is most abused, most been, I'm struggling for words here, but I think you'll get my gist. We should love that, right? And again, in a certain sense, there's a truth to that, but in a big sense, there's not, because you're calling us to, the question is, what are you asking us to value there? That's where I love how this connection to value cuts through. You say, okay, you're calling me to love the thing that's the most minority abused or neglected thing. Why? Right? What's the value there that you want me to love? And there are things that you can call out that should be valued there, but not the very notion of itself of being the other or being mistreated is a value in and of itself, right? And that's where you can get clear on saying, well, one thing I value, another I don't, right? All right, let's keep on going with this quote. Your morality tells you that the purpose of love is to set you free of the bonds of morality, that love is superior to moral judgment, that true love transcends, forgives, and survives every manner of evil in its object. And the greater the love, the greater the depravity it permits to be loved. To love a man for his virtues is paltry and human, it tells you. To love him for his flaws is divine. To love those who are worthy of it is self-interest. To love the unworthy is sacrifice. You owe your love to those who don't deserve it, and the less they deserve it, the more love you owe them. The more loathsome the object, the nobler your love. The more unfastidious your love, the greater your virtue. And if you bring your soul to the state of a dump heap that welcomes anything on equal terms, if you can cease to value moral values, you have achieved the state of moral perfection. All right, so she's like really hammering home, right, this notion. You can see how if you go too far with her way of looking at things, you can like feel this sense of this sense of superiority and, yeah, again, looking down at other people and hostility even. And that's what, can go wrong with getting too far down your thinking. But the main point that she's making, that should we be asked to love things that aren't valuable, actually, or that don't have value? No, that's not right. Let me see if, okay, I have one more quote from her, so let's put that out there and then we can discuss a little bit more. She says, "To love is to value. The man who tells you that it is possible to value without values, to love those whom your praise is worthless, is the man who tells you that it is possible to grow rich by consuming without producing, and that paper money is as valuable as gold." Very Ayn Randian kind of things to say. When it comes to love, the highest of emotions, you permit them to shriek at you accusingly that you are a moral delinquent if you're incapable of feeling causeless love. When a man feels fear without reason, you call him to the attention of a psychiatrist. You are not so careful to protect the meaning, the nature, and the dignity of love. Okay, maybe I should have saved her first quote first, because that kind of puts love in the positive. These last two have kind of shown what's wrong with the notions of love. But I hope you get her gist, that the positive aspect is that love properly conceived is this resonance of value. So kind of with that being the case, I want to now turn it to the three types of love that are also very useful for us to see why, again, just trying to shove all these three things into one is not helpful, and we can get mistaken notions, again, that lead to divorce because we think love is one thing when actually love is many things. And so if you expect one aspect of love where it's supposed to be another, you can say, oh, there's no love here, like in a marriage. We have a loveless marriage, therefore let's get divorced, when maybe you missed the boat on which kind of love you should have had in the first place, right? And we'll see if this definition applies at each of those levels of agape, philia, and eros. But once again, I see some of your quotes have come in, so I want to see what you have been saying about this. All right, Christian says, is the opposite of love hatred or ambivalence? Good to think about. Let's see. Yeah, the opposite of love. I mean, there's always ways to see opposites, right? Sometimes we see opposites as kind of the lack of something, which would lead more to kind of ambivalence, or sometimes we see it as kind of like its opposing force, which would be something like hatred or detestation, maybe you could say. Those two are a little bit different things, but so that's where I'd say kind of, it depends which kind of opposite you're wanting to deal with, and both of those could be seen as opposites. All right, LSJT, it's indifference, I think. There's a thin line between love and hate because love is an intense involvement with the other. You take them as part of you. All right, good point. Amon Hawk, where does infatuation come into play? Also a good question. I mean, one simple way of answering that, which I don't think is a full answer, is how any virtue becomes a vice, and so that is so useful in so many ways. This comes from Aristotle, right? Nicomachean Ethics, I believe, where he lays out this notion that any virtue that we have, such as love, because we still are going to arrive that it is a virtue and a fundamental virtue, can have an excess and it can have a deficiency, right? So an infatuation would be an excess of attraction and therefore wrong. So then the question is, why do you have that excess, right? And there's a good question in the terms of my definition, value. How does that bring in, if you're infatuated with somebody, then is it that you're overly valuing them or valuing them in the wrong way? I mean, maybe in a sense, like, just thinking offhand, I'm talking out loud here, but the way that people tend to be infatuated with somebody else, like another person, tends to go so far that it's almost like you can't see the person, right? You're not having this connection that LSJT is talking about of involvement with the other, where you actually see them. Because if you could, you would realize that your overbearingness is not helpful, is not actually a resonance of values with them, and because of that, you've kind of overshot the mark, if you will, and hence why it's wrong. Again, probably think of a better answer later, but that's at least just some riffing offhand. Christian Nemo, LSJT, I was soliciting it. Yeah, I think I agree. Ambivalence means you aren't even stirred by the thing. Okay, fantastic quote, LSJT, so thank you. And LSJT, I think what you're talking about is femininity confusing their instinct to care for the weak and to empathize with them as love. Weakness is not virtue, but in today's world, we are told it is. And so there is a lot of ways in which this can work. I mean, again, I think that is one way that applies. Again, the other way is today where there's been an attack on the center, on the things that have traditionally been held up as the things of highest value in a society. And so, today there's constantly this notion that the things that have been at the margin, which tend to be mistreated, which tend to be misunderstood, mistreated over time, and that is something that's wrong. But the solution, today is to call out and say, when things are mistreated, the more marginal things are and they don't fit, the more virtuous they are, just because we've kind of just flipped the notion of what's valuable or not. And so, that's what she's also talking about, because she was most concerned about, these notions of kind of sacrifice to that which is depraved in ways that don't serve your self-interest, and that you're just supposed to sacrifice. You're just supposed to love. You're supposed to feel, not think, and not see how something actually damages you. I think things that she was afraid of. But that's where I think with a little more nuance, she would see that there is a concept of sacrifice, of giving something up for some other person, but in a way that ultimately enhances both of you in the long run. And that's kind of what we'll get to with agape, right? Okay, Joel Peterson, thanks for doing this stream. It's really motivating me. You are welcome and glad to be doing them. And LSJT, Christian ambivalence is actually feeling a lot of contradictory things and often being very stirred by the object. I think you're confusing it with indifference. I often convert words too. Okay, well, great discussion at this point. So let's jump in and let's finish this up, because I do, need to get off and get those livestock guardian dogs. They're about 3.5 hours away. But also because I think this will be a better presentation if we keep it kind of tight as we can today. So let's get to, there are 3 different types of love that have traditionally been kind of classified into their own classifications. These the words that I'm using for them come from the Greek. I'm sure other people have seen them. And this isn't to say that there couldn't be a different way of categorizing, but these ones have proved to be pretty useful categories. Anytime we try to categorize the world and say, love is actually 3 things, maybe there's a way it's actually 4. Maybe there's a way there could be 5. Maybe there's a way it could be seen as 2. That's the way, when we were talking about yesterday of reframing the world, you should never just accept wholeheartedly that there's only 3 types of love. We should always be thinking, is there a different way of seeing this? But this way is a good way to start to show how much we shove into the word love and the problems that can come from that. So we've talked a lot in recent weeks about agape, which is the love that God is seen as having for his children, or the love that a parent has for his child. This is person-making love. This is the love that, again, is had between people when people are trying to develop other people into greater developed persons, right? The quintessential example being the baby, the people that show the baby love, and it turns more into a person in the process. And so that isn't just something you do to babies, you do it to people as well. And so that is agape. And this is oftentimes tied with the word charity in some translations of the Bible. So charity gets used as this word, although charity is problematic also because of the way it's been tied up with kind of philanthropy and that kind of thing, that charity is giving money to others. Well, it gets limited, right? It's agape more that is kind of the fuller version of what was meant by charity. And it's agape, the word that gets used predominantly in the New Testament when you get the word charity, or when it says God is love, it's saying God is agape, right? So this is the love that is usually held out as kind of the love that all of us should have for each other, and I fully agree with that. And so bringing that back to my definition, well, why should you love everybody? And that gets down to this notion that also underlies, the Judeo-Christian concept and many other religious concepts, that there's something divine within every person. right? There's something in that people's capacity to create the world, as we talked yesterday about, that's tied to the logos. There's something, that spark of divinity, the ability to progress and develop in all human persons. Even human persons that have something a little bit off with it, such as a disabled person, even the fact that they're a little bit broken in a way doesn't disqualify them from being treated with agape, this fundamental thing that we compare humans to all other things out there in the universe, and we see this is the most complex, impressive thing out there. And the more complex and impressive a thing is to us out there, particularly tied to our abilities to reason, to speak, to think, to love, in the ways that we see those things as being more inherently respect worthy. And so hence agape is there. So you can see how even agape is explainable by this definition, because it shows you inside of every person there's something we should value. But again, I love tying. I really like this definition of love tied to value, because it shows you what you should love in another person, have agape for in another person. But that doesn't mean you accept everything about them. It doesn't mean you should, have agape for their foibles, have agape for their weaknesses, have agape for their annoying habits or things like that. So to have, here's the best way to cut through and just completely say it outright. To have agape for somebody doesn't mean you have to like them, right? And that's a very liberating concept, I think, in the world, because when you try to pack all this stuff into the word love, there's this notion that to love everyone means to like everyone, right? To enjoy everyone, to want to be by everyone, to want to live next to everyone, or things like that. And no, I don't think this is generally held out as the highest form of love, agape is. And I think it's telling you that it is not tied to, liking people, enjoying people. It's tied much more to respect, okay? And so that's what is so powerful about classifying it off as something and saying, this is the highest thing. You don't have to like everyone, but you do need to respect everyone. You should care for their development. You should treat them with a certain dignity that despite everything else they do in life, even if they've committed a murder, you treat them with the dignity of giving them a fair trial, right? You see how that kind of comes out of agape, because you don't have to love the fact that they can do wrong or the capacity to do wrong, but you have this agape for them in the sense that this is also tied into that forgiving notion. You give them certain things that they get without earning them, such as, the respect of a fair trial, of having to have things proved against them. That's just one example. But again, realizing that was to me such a clarifying concept, because, I don't particularly like everybody out in the world, or enjoy talking to everyone in the world, or would want to hang out with people, or certainly not be stranded on a desert island or something like that with a lot of people in the world. But I can very much have agape for them. I can care about them in this sense. I can want them to develop as persons. I can respect their choices. So again, you see how when you start getting specific about love, and here we have agape and a definition tied to value, it can help you lead your life better, because it frees you from these notions that you have to have all the things that society ties into love for everyone, right? Which is just not the case. Okay, so let's go to the next one, philia, right? Which is typically talked about as brotherly love. And this is the love of liking, okay? And so, this is the love of camaraderie, of liking. And there's something of a notion in philia of like exchange, right? Typically, we don't like people that just are parasites to us, that just suck and take from us. Almost everybody you like, even though I don't recommend keeping track, or it's not about an accounting or anything like that, but the people that we like are people that we can kind of have an ongoing back and forth with, if you will. Again, usually best not with a ledger, but just a natural, you enjoy them because they bring you some sort of value, right? And there we get it to the value. You have philia for them because there's some sort of ongoing transition of value between you, to which you really enjoy this person. You have camaraderie and conviviality with this person. And so, again, this is nice because you see this is a valuable type of love, and it's tied to value that you see in certain peoples of the world. But do we need to have philia with everyone? No. That's kind of the liberating concept there, that I don't think you do have to have philia with everyone. This is one that I would highly recommend in a marriage relationship, obviously in any friendship kind of relationship, but even amongst family members. I mean, this is something I've faced even in recent weeks. There can be this expectation that family members are all supposed to just be filial, right? Have this filial relationship and enjoyment one with another. And at the end of the day, the reality of family members is because you don't choose them, because you don't just evolve these natural, there isn't just this natural resonance of back and forth that you can have. There may be kind of family duties and responsibilities that you have this back and forth on, but doesn't mean you have to like each other, enjoy talking with each other and hanging out. No, not necessarily. But I definitely recommend you have agape for your family members, right? So again, getting clear about love can kind of help you to know what you should feel towards people in the world and what it's okay not to feel into the world. Because again, I think agape is the one you say everybody should have agape for everyone. That's the love that leads to world peace. That does lead to peaceful societies and workable relationships with everybody. But agape does not mean philia, does not mean having to like everyone, have a brotherly love with them. And that's a very liberating thing in the world, because it means that peace can achieve even when you don't particularly enjoy other people, right? Okay, and then that leads us to eros, which is typically tied with erotic love, but it's a much broader concept than just that sexual attraction kind of love. Because eros is the love of communion, of separate things becoming one thing. And so just in saying that, hopefully you see that this is very much tied into religion, into families, into any sort of organization. Eros can be there in a business relationship, because it's the notion of kind of, again, sharing, of taking two beings, becoming one being. So combining minds, combining lives, communing, combining values, essentially. So this is a type of love that is, you can see why it's romantic, because and sexual, because even the sexual nature is two beings, coming into being one being. But again, I want you to see the difference, that's one type of eros love, where another type of eros love could happen amongst, two men that have no sexual attraction to each other, that are forming a business and are work to have, to be one combined unit in the way that they execute that business, right? Or a congregation, this is the notion tied into the body, being the body of Christ, where everybody, when they do communion, or take the Lord's Supper, the sacrament, the Eucharist, you are entering into communion with divinity, with Christ, but also with all the other people that are eating the same thing, that are also eating Christ at that same moment. And so there's this eros happening, between you. So again, once you get these clear things, you can see the importance of this kind of love, again, in a family. But even do you have to have conviviality even in a family to have eros, to be unified on something? I would say no. But what you do have to do is, like we've talked about this whole week, you do have to have something above you as a family that is the thing that you look to, that joins you together, right? So this is like Moses and the brazen serpent in the wilderness. There is a power to heal when everyone looks to something and creates a unity into something higher than themselves. And so a family can't just expect themselves to be one just because we share the last name. There actually has to be some effort here. You have to define, you have to put out a vision. If you're the head of a family, you need to put out a vision that everybody can get behind and work. And doesn't mean everyone has to enjoy each other through the whole process and have great philia behind it. It may happen. Lots of brothers and sisters enjoy each other, parents and children, but it doesn't mean it's not a necessity. You can have agape, you can have eros, You don't have to have philia per se. But in as much as you have something that brings you into one, like a vision that you're working together as a family, there's likely to be more philia along the way too, because as it happens, when you have, again, a shared vision that everybody's in on and you're working together on it, look how the philia naturally evolves there, because there's this churn of exchange in the way everybody's helping, right? And so you're more likely to have the philia. Ultimately, to somebody you're getting married to, I would recommend all three. But a whole nother video, and kind of with the story of Sarah and I that we can tell someday, not to pretend that it would actually be interesting, but it is much to get out some concepts. Like, one of the things I would say, that I wanted to say more yesterday to the person who was asking about promiscuity and things like that, which I want to do a whole other video just talking on that topic. But one of the things I would say is, before you eros, right, before you have this erotic sexual coupling with somebody, I would definitely recommend agape and philia established before you eros, I would say, and before you become one thing. Otherwise, bad things flow from that. So, okay, so hopefully we did the job here of showing, look, here's these three different types of things, and also what is the tie of all these to this definition, or bringing value into the definition of love. So I guess I didn't talk about it explicitly with Eros, and here this is kind of the deepest level that you see in, like, the Ayn Rand quote of, you feel this Eros attraction to this resonance of values between two people that, when you combine them together, enhances and you become something greater than you are. And if you use that standard, even at a sexual level, to kind of say, should I enter in a sexual relationship or not, that should always guide you right? When you come together and you join this life and you join physically together like this, will you enhance each other, and will your life become better as a process? Okay, do it, right? But if you haven't laid the groundwork for that to be a sure reality, let's say, don't do it then, right? And another video for another day is, the groundwork that society has generally laid to ensure that there will be proper alignment of two people that enhances and they become a better thing, comes about through a structure like marriage, right? So, in fact, let me just use one more example in that light, that these examples always clarify these things. Recently, I've been watching the show on Netflix called Shtisel, which I highly recommend. It's a show about the Haredi Jewish community in Jerusalem, and just family in that community, otherwise known as ultra-Orthodox. And so a lot of the show has to deal with romantic relationships, and you get to peer into how that particular community handles the romantic relationships in marriage. And it's very interesting, right, to watch kind of the process, because the basic process is that there's these people in the community called matchmakers that work within very specific pockets of the community. So even amongst the Haredi, the ultra-Orthodox, there's all sorts of subsets of those communities, and many people want to marry only within their particular tradition or subset, even of Haredi or ultra-Orthodox Jews, right? And so there's matchmakers to try to, one, limit down things to people that would be families and individuals that would be a good match. So you use those to help in that process, right? And then there's a communication that there's an agreement between the families that there can be a date, right? They go to in the show, usually they go to a hotel lobby and they meet. And so the actual individuals at the end of the day maybe only have a few dates, 2 or 3 dates or something like this. And then generally they're engaged. And at that point, it's supposed to be permanent. If you're engaged and you get married. And so that's so different from the way that the world operates. But kind of looking back at what Eros is, it actually makes a lot of sense. And, I don't know the statistics about the community, but my guess would be that compared to kind of society at large, they're probably as good or better at successful relationships as under this kind of process that they've developed. Again, I'm sure they have problems too, because, marriages always have problems and things fall apart and things like that. But my guess would be that they're as successful or better in terms of, amounts of divorces and people that feel satisfied in their marriages and things like that, just from this particular process. And so from our notions of romantic love today, they're like, how could that happen? Well, again, look at Eros, and it's tied to values. If Eros is this resonance of values, you can see how using a process like that, you're narrowing down the amount of people through this process of matchmaking and stuff to those that already share this huge fundamental underlying structure of values. All right, so there's already this subset there. So by the time it reaches the two, the man and the woman actually meeting each other, it's just a matter of, do they have the final kind of resonance within themselves, because they have to approve and say, yes, I'm willing to get married to this person, or no, and then that a new match is presented, because the groundwork has been laid. The family's values align, the community values align, the religious values align, all those things. And so it's just the last part that's left of is, do we fit in kind of that rocky, fill each other's gaps way, and that happens within 2 or 3 dates, and it actually works, right? So just to show how when you see Eros as this coming together of attraction of values in the sense that we've been talking about, it makes a lot of sense what it is. And what it should be ultimately, again, if you want to Eros with anyone, to have that kind of communion with sexual or non-sexual, that's generally how things work, and you combine to be a better person. Again, there has to be on one level an attraction of that fundamental values, but then in another level you fill each other's gaps. You fill, your masculine lines up with their feminine, if you will. We're always talking about the masculine and feminine here, and so what you end up with from an Eros is something enhanced and greater when these kingdoms, these worlds, these two people come together and become something else. So, okay, that's what I wanted to say about that. And all I have to do now is I want to look back, see your last comments, and we'll wrap this up today. Hopefully it's been useful to kind of, again, start getting specific about what love is. And already in the course of this, thanks to LSJT and Christian and others, you've already got me thinking of things that I need to kind of do to better this definition. So, okay, Christian, you kind of been in that conversation with LSJT, who also said, this is an interesting idea to discuss and an interesting video. Thank you. Christian, Gary, why do you think a language like English, which typically has so many words for single concepts, so many I lose track? We have just one word for love, and inversions the usual pattern versus Greek. Yeah, good question. I mean, a lot of people, consider that like language over time has kind of been debased. I've heard that notion before, but I don't have like the depth of kind of concepts to confirm or deny that. Maybe some of you can do some additional comments on that. But yeah, why English? Yeah, to be honest, that's kind of beyond what I have to say anything helpful about. So that one I'm going to have to think about and maybe start paying attention to see if anything I encounter and the things that I'm thinking about or reading might have some answers to that. But thanks for the question. So Travel Nor, again, I'm always happy to see new names and contributions on here. So thank you for writing or participating. What do you think of the state of marriage and masculinity in the East, Japan, where they are reintroducing traditional masculinity lessons for men because of the low rate of marriage and birth rate? So I don't know particulars, but just kind of reading what you're telling me, I would say, the whole world needs more notions of traditional masculinity back, and it should work if they're truly reintroducing these notions of masculinity and the roles of the masculine, again, that within romantic relationships, so things like that, are to lead out, to propose, to set out a vision, to be a person that is attractive to the other sex, because all those things are tied into masculinity, right? You should have more success, because in general, the complaint has been, I'd say, for several decades, that there's a dearth of good men, masculine men that women find desirable than there are women who want to engage in a relationship. So just on the surface, it sounds all good, but the details, devil's in the details. So thanks for telling me that's happening, because I'll try to learn a little bit more what's going on there, and hopefully have some more to say about that in the future. Okay, well, with that, I think we're going to wrap this one up today. Have a good weekend. And I think I was going to say what kind of things we have on the table to get into. I do want to do an episode, again, from the 2 episodes ago, there was a question about promiscuity and like, why is that not helpful, right? From somebody who was, earnestly asking, like, I have the chance to be promiscuous with women. Why is that not helpful? And I gave a half answer that got a little bit better over the course of the episode, but it over these last few days, I've realized I wasn't bringing it all in kind of the best concepts I have, mainly to do with Eros, of why, what is exactly about engaging in Eros, you could say, with multiple people in the wrong way that proves not helpful to you. And a lot of religions have just said, no, it's forbidden, and kind of just held it at that. God forbids it. But then you're left wondering why. What's so wrong with it? What's wrong with it in a world of birth control and things like that? So I definitely want to hit on an episode like that next week. And next week might be a little surprising, because I will be out of town to a class that deals with all how to harvest and completely use all aspects of a pig. And the classes that we're actually going to slaughter, or harvest is like the more gentle word that's being used now, a pig, and then completely show how to take care of use the whole pig, if you will. And so it is about time to start into harvesting time here at Mission Top. The pigs are just about ready. We could already be going with the sheep and the goats, but I wanted to wait for this class. And so that might bring up some interesting topics, because I don't see things like that as separate from everything we've been talking about. It's all tied in. The way that we eat is again, so tied into philosophy, religion, ritual, beauty, the whole way you approach the world, that I'd like to start pulling in some of things, kind of ecological things. There's a particular author that I think we're going to explore, so we're going to do some of that as well. And then I've been telling you that there's this series coming on the nature of temples, and why temples have existed basically in every culture, that we can see, as far back as we can see, and why have they always existed? What have they done for humanity? We're going to do that. So just to give you a little peek into the future of what's happening in these live streams. But again, thank you for being here. And this is me signing off for this week, and hope to see you back next week.